The following podcast may contain adult language and conversations revolving around situations not suitable for immature audiences. Spoilers and general political incorrectness can often be expected, so listener discretion is advised.
They must be destroyed on sight!
Hello and welcome to this episode, an intermission episode of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, a movie podcast. I'm Daniel, and usually Lee and I and Paul will sit around and talk about a movie or two that we have watched this week. Lee was not available. He had some personal issues he had to deal with, and so I volunteered to basically talk to you guys myself and do kind of an intermission episode because I have watched quite a few things that I thought would be interesting to talk about on this podcast. And so those of you who only listen for the much more entertaining Lee and Paul segments can basically turn this off now. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a few things that I watched, basically all streaming on Netflix, or mostly streaming on Netflix, including a TV series, and I'll kind of dig into that pretty shortly. A little warning for you guys, I do have a cat and a dog playing behind me, so there may be a little bit of extraneous background noise, but I'm not going to take it that seriously. You guys can just deal. So the first thing I do want to mention is that I did watch the Netflix series, Making a Murderer. This is streaming on Netflix. You can watch it. It's 10 episodes long. It's pretty much kind of a cult sensation, not even a cult sensation. It's this big popular thing right now. I had heard it's pretty addictive, so I put on the first episode and then ended up watching all 10 of them over the course of about 2 days. It's hugely marathonable. It's a really, really effective crime documentary. What I'm going to do is I am going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to save it for the end. That way, anybody who's kind of worried about spoilers for that, or just not interested in listening to me talk about something that isn't really in the purview of this podcast, can kind of wait to the end. But I do recommend it. It is really good. At least watch the first episode or two. I think it really does grab you. And I do have lots of thoughts about it. So hang on to that. We'll talk about that at the end. Another big thing I got to watch. This one is streaming on Netflix. It is a little kind of sci-fi action film, independent drama thing called Time Lapse. This is really small. It's intimate. It does have kind of a time travel element, and I would recommend, if you're interested in that, I do recommend this film. It is pretty effective. It's well acted. It does have some issues, but I'd recommend, if you haven't seen it and you find it at all interesting, to not learn anything more about it. Just sit down and watch it. This is probably one that works best having as little knowledge about it as possible. I did. And I will say that some of the stuff towards the middle of the film, some of the performances and some of the kind of minor characters that show up, in particular one I found kind of unrealistic and a little bit too much genre furniture for me. But I thought overall this is a pretty effective little kind of sci-fi drama about 3 characters who find a machine that can take photos 1 week or 1 day, 24 hours in advance. So basically you're getting a photo of tomorrow, and it's kind of this locked off photo, and kind of it has some interesting questions about free will and about, explorations of these character dynamics. I think it is pretty effective. It is definitely worth watching, and yeah, go check that out. Yeah, again, it has some issues, but it's still worth 90 minutes or an hour and 40 minutes of your time. The next thing I watched is a terrible comedy. It's called 10 Rules for an Open Relationship. I was kind of in the mood for a kind of silly sex comedy, and even though this had a 1-star rating on Netflix, I thought, well, let's pull it up anyway and just see what I have to say about it. And wow, this thing is terrible. It's got some actors in it that are a bunch of people who are in kind of Disney Channel productions and then now have gotten older. I mean, I guess it's fairly effective in terms of, like, the performances aren't terrible, but they're pretty bad. This is basically just a deeply, deeply unfunny sex comedy. It doesn't even really have any nudity in it. It does get more and more desperately unfunny as you go. There's maybe 30 minutes worth of material in this. It is a total idiot plot, and it's stretched out to 90 minutes. I will say that Michael McKean and Wendy McLendon-Covey are both in this. They're both pretty good. Particularly Michael McKean is pretty much the reason to watch this film, as he often is. But don't watch it. This is pretty terrible. It has nothing insightful to say about open relationships or about sex in general. It's pretty bad. Don't watch it. Another comedy that worked a little bit better. It was a little movie called All Cheerleaders Die. This is a kind of slasher film, supernatural horror film, parody sort of thing. It takes a while to get going. It takes about 30 minutes to really get you into the kind of overall plot. It spends a lot of time on its characters in the first third or so. And not necessarily in an effective way. I think that ultimately kind of the way that this goes doesn't really sell its character beats as well as it should if it's going to focus on these characters so much. And in particular, where we spend a lot of time basically getting to know characters who are just going to die and not really do anything in between. I really wish they'd either cut this cast down a little bit and really focused on the people that we're supposed to care about, or that they had just gone straight up full out comedy on it and not. And that way we could kind of revel in the satire a little bit more. There is some kind of delicious satire going on here, and this is a film with that has a pretty strong queer theme. I think this will become a kind of or it might become kind of a camp classic among queer kids in the future, because fundamentally the kind of two main characters are a lesbian couple, and it's pretty good at that. One thing I will say that bothered me about the film was just that the main villain, when you only have one black dude in a film, don't make him your villain. Particularly a almost cacklingly evil, terrible person who lives to sexually abuse women and stab them. That's usually not the best thing to do with the only black character in your film. It's kind of a very overplotted. It does spend a lot of time in that first third kind of giving us a lot of backstory that doesn't lead anywhere. I know there's supposed to be a sequel to this, and maybe some of that gets used in the sequel, but it feels just really overstuffed, and it really could have used a kind of a rewrite or two to really dig into some of these ideas a little bit more deeply. One other criticism I'd have of the film is just that the villain, the main bad guy, he's really, really evil, and the sequences of him kind of being abusive, emotionally and sexually abusive, are way too intense for what should be kind of a fun and goofy kind of spoof of kind of supernatural horror. I do think it kind of unbalances the film, and it does make it a lot more uncomfortable to watch than I think it was necessarily intended to be. Ultimately, you can do kind of a commentary on sexual violence and do it in kind of a satirical or parodic way. And you can do kind of intense kind of sexual violence and make that meaningful. But it really just feels like it's a little bit out of place here, and I didn't think it was well handled. So that's something that mattered to me, and I would definitely have a hard time recommending it to in kind of a general way without letting people know that that's something that's in the film. Next, I've got two films which are effectively kind of forgettable action films. The first is called Blitz, and this was again streaming on Netflix. This is a Jason Statham vehicle. Jason Statham is sleepwalking through this. It's essentially a Dirty Harry or a Death Wish remake. It's another, kind of vaguely misogynistic, homophobic, violent cop who goes by his own rules and teaming up with the kind of the goody two-shoes character. This is pretty much completely unreconstructed. Everybody's kind of walking through it. I didn't write down the actor's name, but the guy who plays the kind of goody two-shoes was in Hot Fuzz. He's quite good. I would love to see a better movie with these two actors in it. But this is really, really forgettable. There's a subplot involving a young police officer, a young female police officer who is kind of becomes addicted to drugs, and I mean, this is apparently based on a series of novels, or it's one of a series of novels involving this character, and it feels that way. I mean, it definitely feels like an adaptation of kind of a generic crime novel. I don't have an issue with that even, but it would be nice to get a little bit more depth on this if we're going to kind of want to follow this character around. It's really forgettable. In fact, I forgot I had watched it, and when I was going to sit and record this until I have a spreadsheet of all the films that I watched recently, so that way I don't forget them. And this was really almost ridiculously easy to forget. The only other thing I'll say about this film is that Dirty Harry was 45 years ago, and are we still writing basically an unreconstructed version of that character? I mean, Dirty Harry had a more sophisticated view of, police violence and kind of road cops than this film does. And, again, completely forgettable. The other one I watched was a film called My Name is Modesty. This was a kind of, it's basically based on the Modesty Blaze comics. This is a film from 2004. It feels a lot like a TV pilot. It doesn't really feel like a feature film. The lead actress who plays Modesty Blaze is perfectly fine, but nothing memorable. The film is fairly well directed. It's basically low budget. It feels like kind of a bottle episode. It basically is largely set in one kind of casino and basically on one small set. It's pretty decent. It's 78 minutes long. It's worth 78 minutes, I guess, if you're interested in watching something like this. It's mildly diverting, but again, really forgettable. Really not anything you should really seek out. I would kind of, I mean, again, it feels very much like a kind of a low budget TV series, like kind of an action TV series from the mid 2000s. If that's something that sounds at all interesting to you, it's free streaming on Netflix. I'll probably never think of it again after this moment. Something that's a little bit better for you to watch, is a documentary called Electric Boogaloo. This is a documentary about Canon films. This is really entertaining. It's really fun. It's definitely worth a watch. It kind of goes through the whole history of Canon films and of the two brothers that started it. All those 70s and 80s cheese-tastic action tits films, which we love so much on this show. We should really do more Canon films on They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. Lee, if you're listening to this, I would definitely love to watch some of these films, maybe do a Canon month or something. The one thing I will say about the documentary is that it lacks a little bit of a distance and critical eye towards its material. It really kind of accepts uncritically the kind of I don't want to say hero worship, but there is a little bit of a kind of heroism of the two guys, and look at how goofy and fun their movie company was, etc., etc. And it's I would rather see something that had a little bit more like to hear from some of the people who did not get on with these two guys in the documentary. But it is it's perfectly fine. It's just sort of it definitely buys into that hero logic a little bit much. So I actually did watch one Canon film just inspired by the documentary. I found a copy of Last American Virgin. This is from the early 80s. It's kind of a Porky's knockoff. It delivers still nudity. It's pretty diverting. It's kind of fun. It's about these three guys trying to get laid and the little misadventures they get into. There's nothing hugely complex about this. You can watch it with the sound off and get pretty much the plot of the film. Will just kind of follow along. There's some pretty cute little sequences involving substituting sweet and low for cocaine and a middle-aged Hispanic woman who screws the teenage protagonists and that sort of thing. You probably know if this is up your alley or not. The one thing I'll say is that in the final third you get this like abortion subplot that kind of comes out of nowhere, and the ending of the film is kind of an MRA fever dream. I mean, it definitely it kind of gets this like big emotional heft at the very end that I think is completely unearned and deals with some pretty nasty stereotypes about, quote unquote nice guys, etc. Probably worth watching if you like these kind of 80s cheese-tastic sex flicks. It delivers on the nudity, it delivers on the kind of goofy comedy, but it's mostly pretty forgettable. Just go watch Porky's instead. Finally, the last film I'm going to talk about is I watched The Thin Blue Line, and this is the Errol Morris documentary. From 1988, as I recall. This is, I'd never seen this before, although I kind of had known of it. This is a kind of the film that Errol Morris built his kind of current style on. He basically the Philip Glass score, the use of the kind of locked off cameras, the reenactments. This is sort of the first time that Errol Morris used a lot of those techniques, and this is definitely going to be, this is really where you see Errol Morris become Errol Morris. This is a truly great film. I mean, it's rightly called one of the great documentaries of all time. It's also a great little crime movie, because it is ultimately about, kind of interrogating who killed this cop. I mean, that's sort of that's the basic story, is trying to figure out who killed this guy. Again, probably the less you know about it, probably the more interesting you're going to find this. If you're not familiar with the case at all, and you don't kind of know how this ends, basically there's a guy who ends up getting out of prison because of the action of this film, and I think everybody watching it would know that going in, so I don't feel bad about spoiling that for you. But absolutely, if you're at all interested in kind of true crime and true crime documentaries and the way that documentaries function in Errol Morris's career, this is a must watch, and it is currently streaming on Netflix. Which is probably a good thing, just because it's I think they basically picked it up because of the Making a Murderer thing, because they made that documentary series, and it really pairs well with that documentary series.
Hey, yeah, this is Rob Zombie, and when you're not watching my wife's flat ass deflate even more in every subsequent film I put her in, you should be listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight Movie Podcast, yeah! Mars News Podcast!
I will go into a little bit more Making a Murderer now, just because I am at the end, and if you're not interested in hearing that, or if you think you're going to watch it and don't want spoilers, then you can go turn it off. But Making a Murderer is fundamentally a story about the failures in the justice system. There's been a lot of conversation about, whether this guy is guilty or not, whether this Steve Avery guy is guilty or not, which I think is perfectly fine conversation for us to be having. But I think it misses, to some degree, the point of the documentary, which is about, like, this guy just didn't get a fair trial. And didn't get a fair trial for reasons that had nothing to do with him, and that feel kind of systemic. There is the argument that, this was a high profile case, and et cetera, but fundamentally this guy had access to really good lawyers and had access to lots of resources, even though he was a man kind of living in poverty. I mean, he was not a wealthy man, and he did get ganged up on by the justice system. But ultimately it's kind of about to the degree that justice is simply unable to be achieved in our current setup and our current situation, and is it something that we can actually achieve? It is kind of about the fundamental flaws in the justice system, and if anyone does want to chat about this, feel free to tweet at me or email me or whatever, and I would love to kind of detail more thoughts. Maybe if Lee watches this or Paul watches this, we can have a conversation on the main show at some point in the future. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks a lot for listening to me babble on by myself for 20 minutes or so about some movies I've watched. Next week we are planning on doing Fritz Lang's M from 1931. There's also a kind of a film noir American remake from 1951 that I think we're going to be discussing at the same time, so I look forward to that. And then the episode after that is going to be Dawn of the Dead. So, and that's going to be the kind of big, we're all just going to gush over how brilliant Dawn of the Dead is for our big episode 50. So, look forward to all that. It's going to be great. Thanks to Lee for letting me kind of do a little commentary here, and see you next week.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For our other episodes, links to Daniel, Paul, and Lee's other stuff, and links to some great podcasts of similar interest, visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can leave us comments on the site or directly email us. We listen and respond to everything. Thank you. Drive through.